Susan Seymour Adams disappeared September 30th, 1990. Selway Bitterroot Wilderness, near Battle Lake, Idaho. 42-year-old Susan Adams disappeared during a camping trip with her husband Tom near the area of Battle Lake in the Selway Bitterroot Wilderness, east of Grangeville, Idaho, on September 30th, 1990. Susan had gone bird watching in a nearby meadow, and despite the finding of tracks in the area, she has never been found. Both Susan and Tom enjoyed the outdoors and going on adventurous trips together. The couple had spent months researching and planning a trip near the Idaho-Montana border, where they had hired a tour company called Iron Horse Outfitters to help them explore the wilderness. According to Tom, Susan wasn't an experienced outdoors person, but she did enjoy being in the woods and was excited about going on the trip. The Selway Bitterroot Wilderness is a protected wilderness area that straddles the states of Idaho and Montana. The 1.3 million acres makes it one of the largest designated wilderness areas in the United States. It spans the Bitterroot mountain range on the border between Idaho and Montana and covers parts of Bitterroot National Forest, Clearwater National Forest, Lolo National Forest, and the Nez Perce National Forest. The mountainous areas around Bitterroot are rugged alpine, while the lower areas are covered by dense coniferous forest. Susan and Tom arrived in Idaho Falls on Saturday, September 22nd, 1990, and then drove to Hamilton, Montana to meet up with Art Griffith, owner of the outfitting business. On the following Wednesday morning, the group headed for the camp, a 7-hour horseback ride into the Battle Lake area near the Bitterroot Divide. The group spent several days at the camp, hunting, bird watching, and enjoying the mild fall weather. On September 29th, 1 week after they had arrived in Idaho, Tom set off for an overnight trip with his hunting guide. Because Susan wasn't as adventurous as Tom, she chose to stay behind at base camp. Susan and another guide accompanied them to the ridge above the campsite, where they would begin their hunt. Susan and the guide returned to camp with the horses. That was the last time Tom ever saw Susan. On Sunday, September 30th, Susan reportedly told the base camp cook that she was going on a short hike to a nearby meadow so she could do some bird watching. She did not leave with any gear other than the camouflage print clothing she was wearing, a camera, and a pair of binoculars. Tom returned from the hunting trip later that afternoon and learned Susan had taken a short hike to birdwatch. But by the time evening had approached, Tom became worried when Susan still hadn't returned and decided to hike to the meadow to find her. Tom stated he hiked towards the meadow following her footprints down a dusty trail. But just before reaching the meadow, Susan's footprints abruptly ended, as if she had suddenly vanished into thin air at that point. Tom wrote in a statement to police a month later, "I followed the footprints to a place about 20 yards from the meadow where the track stopped." Tom and the tour guide searched for Susan into the night, but found no trace of her. The next morning, one of the guides rode a horse back to town to alert the authorities. Air and ground searches were conducted, but they were fruitless. By Tuesday morning, the weather had taken a turn for the worse, and the search was hindered by the snow and cold. The next day, the search was called off until the weather had cleared. A week later, the search resumed for another 3 days before more bad weather set in, and the search was shut down for the winter. I believe beyond any reasonable doubt that Susan Adams died from injuries or other related causes due to being lost or hurt in the wilderness area near Battle Lake, wrote Sheriff Randy Baldwin in his final report on the case. I also believe that Susan Adams' remains are still in that area, but feel that any future organized search would not be effective in locating her remains. In July 1991, another search was conducted, this time using dogs and trackers to try to locate Susan's remains. According to the head of detectives for the Idaho County Sheriff's Department, Captain Scott Mueller, it was the largest search he could remember in Idaho County. There was a lot of pressure, he said. Susan's husband Tom worked for the governor of Texas, and the governor got involved, asking the National Guard to free up helicopters to help with the search. The search also meant a lot to Sheriff Baldwin, who went on a hunger strike for the duration of the search, Mueller said. He figured if Susan was out there hungry, he would be too. The second search was much more intensive, so much so that the searchers literally walked at arm's length from one another across acres and acres of wilderness. Possible tracks were found, indicating that the person that left them had possibly suffered an injury. There is now a difference in the track and the prints the report on the search reads. The left foot is turned out like an injury, possible fracture or sprain of the left lower extremity. The area searched was described by a psychic. I feel as she is within a 3 to 5 mile distance and in the direction of north to northwest of her campsite, the psychic wrote. The psychic also believes Susan died of head injuries caused by falling from a cliff. Susan's husband Tom was initially considered a suspect, but he and all the other members of the group took a polygraph test and passed. What happened to Susan still remains a mystery. No remains or further evidence has ever been found.